أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Now, some of the things that we have stated have caused many minds to wonder and caused them internal struggle, that how can a prophet allow raids on caravans that are going about their own business? And indeed, when we look at the marriages of the prophet, they cause a bit of a struggle. The other decisions of the prophet, they cause struggle. Now, the thing that is wrong here is that we are trying to evaluate the blessed prophet and his action and his conduct in accordance with today's value system. We have to understand that there are certain morals that are salient: the sacredness of life, no coercion in religion, and by principle societal justice. But when it comes to societal justice, and I need to explain this somewhat, societal justice is contingent upon the growth of the community, how far their minds are evolving and at what rate. There is an internal dynamic process within us as human beings where we are becoming constantly more and more refined. This refined state is a gradual process. As a child from birth grows into becoming a young adult, then a fully grown adult, then a family man, you will see a change in their outlook, in their attitude, in their sense of right and wrong. This is due not to the intellectual growth, it is due to the refinement of the inner being, which is known as inner nobility. As human beings, we have the breath of God within our chests. That breath of God emerges gradually with the growth process. Now, as it does so within the case of an individual, the same is the case within the collective humanity. Now, different societies may grow at a different rate, but by and large, there is one standard. After the First World War, the human nobility globally thereabouts grew to a level where we could draft out a charter for universal or inalienable human rights. There was no country after that that said, why should people have the right to be free, or the right to be fed, or the right to be sheltered? When I look back at our own community and our own growth, I remember there was a famine in Ethiopia early on in the 80s. And I went to the members of our community and I said, look, why don't you announce for us to donate to the famine-struck people of Ethiopia? The first response I got from our community, and I was very young at that point, was that, well, they are not Muslims. So the nobility of the community wasn't refined enough at that point, and hence they discriminated on grounds of Islam and non-Islam. They could not see that these are hungry children who are dying, and your God cannot ordain you to only look after your own kind. But that was the level of the community. At that point, it was befitting. Today, the community would never think of such a thing. They would see it as a cardinal sin. So the human nobility is on a growth trajectory. It is always refining itself. As it refines itself, the intellect is prompted to justify its state of nobility. So the intellect actually comes afterwards, the nobility comes first. So when we are talking about the Prophet, we have to understand what were the salient morals that befit human nobility, and what were those that were contingent to time and space. So if it is a normality in a region to marry young girls and they do not see it as something morally frowned upon, then we can't take that case and bring it to today and then judge by today's standards and say that they were immoral. In their time, it was not considered as reprehensible or morally offensive. So if you look at Nabi Musa, in his time, the Quran says, فَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. The Israelites, when they committed idolatry by worshipping the calf, the communication came, فَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. That is better in the sight of your bari'ekum. And then God turned to them mercifully. So at this point, they took naked blades and they killed each other. Now by today's standard, you will say, what sort of a God was that? What sort of a God can tell his own people to go and kill yourselves as a punishment for worshipping a calf? But at that point, it was acceptable. They did not frown upon it. Neither did they say to Moses, what sort of a barbaric God is this? In fact, they were more than happy to engage in the process from what we read from within the exegetical literature. Today it would be considered as, what sort of a barbaric God is this? So God himself is displaying a sense of morality that is in tune and in line with the growth process of the human bodies. Then we have to understand that we as human beings are untarnished souls, but we as human bodies are contingent to the processes of growth and experience. So these two things need to be borne in mind. Now when we go to Nabi Ibrahim, he was going to slaughter his son Ismail as a sacrifice to God. He did not see anything wrong in there. And Abraham is the father of all monotheistic faiths. That is because in his context, that was a practice that was allowed, and God abolishes that practice. In the time of Moses, stoning people to death was allowed. The Prophet Muhammad omits this from the Quran altogether to show and to display that human nobility is refining itself. Now, the yardstick is that when the Prophet raided the caravan, did anybody blame him for an immoral act of raiding the caravan? Did anybody blame him for stealing? Did anybody blame them for murder? The blame was that you violated the sacred month. That was the blame, because that was a standard of the day, that the sacred months cannot be violated. And the Quran upholds that yes, it's wrong. To kill in the sacred month, it's wrong. So the Quran acknowledges the moral behaviors of that time, that killing in the sacred month is wrong. But did anybody blame the Prophet for stealing? No. Did anybody blame him for killing unrighteously? No. Did the people who were killed feel that they were murdered? No. So you have to see that these sort of notions of murder and stealing are modern day notions. That's the first thing. But back in the day, they also existed. Were they right at that time? No. Stealing and murder were not right even by those standards. But at the raiding of the caravan, nobody blamed the Prophet for stealing or for murder. What they did blame him for was violation of the sacred month. As I said, the Quran acknowledges that this was violation of the sacred month and it is wrong. However, the wrong that you people have done is far greater. So the justification for the raiding of the caravan was already there within the minds of the people, and the Quran re-emphasizes it, that you expelled them from their houses. The Meccans said they fled. But you can ask the Meccans, when you don't let them practice their religion, and a part of their religion is to talk with others as well and to express to them that this is what we stand for, which is against the religion that you are upholding, and that causes offense to you, so you make life unbearable for them, boycotting them, killing them, beating them, putting rocks on their chests. What are these people supposed to do? So the Quran quite rightly sees that no, this was expulsion, eviction, and then the Meccans confiscated their property. So there is that justification in addition to the norm of the day. So I hope that has clarified our minds. Now I'll just build on that. I often say this, that years from now, having servants will be no less immoral than having slaves. So will the people 100 years from now look back to this day and point fingers at us and say, these people, how immoral they were? So now, if a grand person like the Pope has a servant, or an Ayatollah who has a servant, will they be judged 100 years from now as being immoral people? Or will there be that sophistication to say that no, nobility was always refining itself. At that point they were abiding by their standards of nobility, yet it did not fringe upon the salient moral sacredness of life, freedom of thought, for example, freedom of the body, because these are the norms right now in inalienable human rights. In this way, we cannot take today's standards, apply them to the Prophet, and then say, well, I'm struggling with how the Prophet actually ordained such an act. The other thing we need to clarify here is that, look, the Prophet is a remarkable man, and I hope we can show this through these discourses, that he was a remarkable man. And today we will talk further into it, that how he managed to, within that span of 10 years, convert the whole of that region to monotheism, not by forced conversion as you will see today, but conversion that was accepted by the people, and not that they did not have any choice, they had choice in the matter as well, and they converted. There was no forceful conversion, because the Quran already said, La ikraha fid din. But we have to understand that the Prophet is within a human context. And the human context needs to be appreciated fully. Today, if moral people stand and they want to bring about an optimal community, they will not be able to do so. It's an impossible task. There are 8 billion of us. Look at how frail we are. We voted for Brexit. Some on the lines of, economically, it is better for our country. But majority, it seems, I don't want to offend anybody, but a great number, it seems, voted for Brexit, not due to economical reasons that were real, but on terms of racist and prejudicial basis. And the evidence of that is that the day after the Brexit vote took place, the highest search on Google was, what is Brexit? So we all voted for Brexit, I didn't. And then the next day we started to understand, well, what have we done now? Now they were interviewing somebody and she said, well, you know, these foreigners, Europeans come and take our jobs from us. So the interviewer asked her, well, are you working? She said, no, I'm not, I'm unemployed. But if I were to look for a job, I would find that a European has taken it as opposed to me. You see, this is a real human context. Russia and Ukraine's battle, we are all suffering, yet we are not mature enough to understand the underlying causes. We, the masses, we are so naive or insecure or unable to understand that we have real ability, that we can globally protest against these wars. We can bring our governments into check and balance, and they have to respond to us, and they have to uphold justice, but that doesn't happen, does it? Show me one place on this earth in the 21st century, Muslim, non-Muslim, where you find an ideal state. You will not find it. It is not to be found. This is how human beings are. At most, what we can do is, we can put in processes and hope that the trajectory will be an evolutionary growth trajectory. That's all we can do. That is all the Prophet could do. He can't do more than that. In meager 10 years of Madina, what else is he supposed to do? He was supposed to redress the balance and hope that things will take a positive turn from this point onwards. And you can see, had the Prophet not come, where would humanity be today? The way the Muslims have impacted the world after the Prophet left, when the West was in dark ages, the transference of knowledge, all these scientific discoveries, they moved it forward to this state today and to the whole discourse of human rights and human nobility. Had it not been for that piece of the puzzle, which was a massive piece, we would have never arrived at this stage today. It is very wrong to think that the Muslims have contributed this. The Muslims have to see themselves as a part of a whole in which everybody is contributing. And the want of God is for the whole of the humanity to bloom, to flourish and come to its completion. God was not interested in Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, whatever. God is interested in humanity, the human khilafah. We see this very clearly from the Quran and the conduct of the Prophet. So the Prophet could only at most initiate processes. He can't do more than that. We have to be realistic about these things. I'll give a little example that I often give. I'm often faced with this challenge in my own mind. But what is it all for? Why waste time like this? Why not retreat to a cave and engage in meditation? Much to the want of my audience as well. Yeah, you got it, right? I ask myself, what is the purpose of it all? It doesn't make any sense. Nobody's going to improve in any way, and God can do his bit. The answer is there. Several billion years ago maybe, or millions, you lose count, right? But many, 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 many hundreds of millions years ago, if not about a couple of billion years ago, the earth was inhabited by bacteria. The environment was inconducive for plants to grow because of the constitution and the ratio of gases within the atmosphere. Now these bacteria, their job was merely to breathe in and breathe out. Now one bacteria turns to another bacteria and says, what are we doing? We are just breathing in and breathing out, and that's it. And then we'll die within a moment. And truly, it's a futile existence. There's no purpose to your existence. You're just breathing in and breathing out. You might as well not be here. But today, mine and 8 billion people and 124,000 prophets' existence on the face of this earth is all owed to those bacteria and their act of breathing in and breathing out. They breathed in, and then they breathed out carbon dioxide, and then the plants grew, they breathed out oxygen, and then we appeared. It was due to their simple little breaths that we exist here today. Similarly, in the scheme of God, all of us are playing a role. So my existence is purposeful, don't think otherwise. We all are here to do something, to move it a step ahead. In the midst of all of us comes a giant like Muhammad Rasulullah and totally changes the course of history. And today the entirety of this earth, like it or not, is beholden to that man's contribution. Whether you like it or not, think about what the trajectory of the earth was, of the human community was, when he came. Dark ages on this side, the barbaric Arabs on the other side. The Sassanids on one side, the Byzantines on the other side, idolatry, pillaging, killing, expanding their empires. You get somebody who comes and talks on the lines of spirituality and intellectual refinement and sets a new trajectory for the whole of the globe. Trust me, if you look at history in this way, with an open mind, fully, you will say, wow, what an indispensable role Abraham has played. Moses has played, Jesus has played, Muhammad Rasulullah has played. At that time, we will be filled with appreciation for these people, what role they have played. Now, the Meccan phase of the Prophet was an essential phase. It wasn't a societal phase. It was a personal, God-centered phase. How? In the Meccan phase, the inner being was being addressed in essence. And that is the message that is to survive till the day of Qiyamah. And that is where we are supposed to get to. Being God-centered, being noble, being refined, being proper stewards of God on earth. In Madina, he has to now intertwine that message of God centricity, that essence, into a growing community with all its frailties and all its challenges. You've got the people of the book who are saying he is just wrong. When they understand, no, he is right, they're filled with jealousy, or if they understand he is right, they're unable to let go of their beliefs because of their huge emotional attachment with it, like the Christians of Najran. And you have the enemies of the Quraysh and the other pagan tribes who just don't understand what he is all about, who can only understand tribal existence and warfare and security of the day and how to secure their sustenance. That's all they understand. Or you have the hypocrites of Medina who are just filled with jealousy, who are getting consumed inside by his growing popularity, or you get the skeptical Muslims. Now imagine, in the midst of all of that, a single man within 10 years is able to change and shift the whole paradigm and put it on a positive trajectory of growth. Isn't that a miracle? Nobody has achieved that before him, and it's an impossible task. It's an impossible task. So it is here, when I look at the Quran and the story of the Prophet, I don't see it simply as the Quran or the Prophet. I see a very different story. The Quran, the Prophet, the context, all coming together. There is a pre-planned scheme, and yet it is being played out in real time with all the possibility of things going wrong, and things indeed have gone wrong, and they've been tweaked and put right. So everything is happening together. There is every possibility that the plan will not work out, and yet it's falling in place. So it's not predestined per se. It's a closed system and an open system at the same time. The Prophet is being told, there's no guarantee for you. You will have to lead this community in real time as a real human with human frailties, as somebody who doesn't know what's around the corner. And that is why it was such an impactful story. The Prophet said, لَوْ عَلِمْتُ الْغَيْبِ لَاسْتَكْثَرْتُ مِنَ الْخَيْرِ وَمَا مَسَّنِيَ السُّوءُ. Had I known the unseen, I would have reaped its benefits and no evil would have befallen me. I would have told those people, don't raid this caravan. But as a result of raiding the caravan, I've got this headache now. Can you see this? His own anguish would have been relieved. Bibi Aisha goes missing. If he knew the unseen, he wouldn't have been so anguished. Had he known that within 10 years, Allah will bring the whole region under Islam, he wouldn't have been so perturbed in the beginning. In fact, he might have become laid back somewhat, and then it wouldn't have worked in any case. It's a very real story. And the whole message of the Prophet is the Prophet himself. It's a living message. So now, if that prelude has gone in, we look at the timeline in Medina. You see, the first thing is that the Quraysh are very powerful people, and they are merchants, and Mecca is the center of trade. So you can imagine, in a setting when there are tribes, and the whole status quo is that you have to belong to a tribe, the tribe offers you security and protection. Yes? Then at that point you would be in a very vulnerable position. You wouldn't want to pick a fight with a trade center who is the most powerful tribe. So all the tribes around the region obviously are looking towards the Quraysh. The Muslims in Medina cannot even grant themselves security and economical stability, let alone posing a threat for anybody else. So within the first 5 years of migration, you find 3 wars or battles with the Quraysh. Now the Muslims are severely outnumbered in all of them. The Quran continuously assists the Prophet, shapes and reshapes the minds of the people by telling them, look, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you're not supposed to do. I have to say that the Quran had to stoop to their level. So if you look at these 3 battles, in Battle of Badr, God says, you did not kill them, I killed them. So it's incentivizing and encouraging the Muslims to be brave. You will have paradise. Those who have gone before you are giving good tidings to those who have yet to join. Fine, that's done. In Battle of Uhud, the Muslims are outnumbered again, 3,000 to 700. When the Muslims lose the battle, there is an opportunity for Quran to drive home the essential message. The Quran says, these are days that God rotates amongst people. One day they win, the other day you win. What is important to God is not physical victory. What is important to God is what is going on within yourselves. If through defeat you are refined, then you are victorious. If through victory you become distanced from God, then that victory is a failure. He was refining them, finding those moments. The Quran says to them, so what if Muhammad has died? You have to come to God. The whole religion of Islam is not contingent to Muhammad, whether he lives or dies. Many have come before him, they have died and gone away. So what? Can you see the phenomenal message the Quran is giving? The Quran says, God has yet to know what is within your souls. You have to prove yourselves. So at the Battle of Uhud, the Muslims were complacent. God gave us victory. We were 313, outnumbered, without any armor or weaponry. God gave us victory at Badr. He will give us victory at Uhud. No. The Quran says you were greedy for the spoils of war. You brought this upon yourselves. Why did you not listen to the Prophet? And then you began to run away. Did you yourselves not say, at Badr, if only I had been of those who had been slain on this day? You said that at Badr. I gave you the opportunity. You ran away. The Quran uses that opportunity to tweak them from inside. So together with the body organization of the community, the Quran was working to the essential, at the essential level, and modifying their souls. The Quran had to intervene. Allah says in the Quran, He put ra'ab, fear, in the hearts of the Badriyun. Again, the Quran says, when Abu Sufyan was advancing again to finish off the Muslims, God placed fear and terror in his heart. So he was distracted and he left. Similarly, you find at the battle of the trench, Khandak, you have got 10,000 Arabs comprising of Quraysh, the Jews, it seems from Khaybar, and many others, the little tribes that were around the area that the Quraysh had summoned. The Muslims are 3,000. So you are seeing a steady growth of the Muslim community, but they are way outnumbered. So there is a trench built. Bani Qurayda, who had a treaty with the Prophet, Bani Nadir had broken the treaty. They had incited Bani Qurayda to attack the Muslims and their homes in Madina, because the Muslims had left Madina to meet the oncoming forces at the place where obviously you know where Khandak is right now, in Madina. So here now, you are finding the Muslims outnumbered again. So the first battle was won by the Muslims. The second one, won by the Quraysh. The third one, the Quraysh did not show up, the Muslims showed up. The fourth one, in 5th Hijrah, the Muslims are outnumbered. Now what happens is that the Quraysh leave and they go back after a month of siege, and their food finishes, their supplies dry out, they leave. So it wasn't a victory for either side. Now this is happening with the Quraysh. Now you can imagine, now the Quraysh are getting tired of these Muslims. The tribes have gone away. The Prophet has a dream that he has walked into Mecca, performed his Umrah, sacrificed his animal, and shaven off his head. So the Prophet says about this dream to his companions, and they are overjoyed. So they say, we'll go. So none of them is carrying weapons. This is in 6th Hijrah. None of them is carrying any weapons. They march towards Mecca. At this point, there are 1,400. So you can see the growth process. They are growing. They're becoming comfortable with their Islam. When they're approaching Mecca, the Meccans fear that these people are going to attack us. When they see them, they see that no, they have come in peace. Now, it was a sacred month of Umrah. So the Meccans said, we have never stopped anybody from coming to perform sixth year of Hijrah. We have never stopped anybody from performing Umrah. Yet we will not allow them to come in. So they camped at a place known as Hudaybiyyah, at a distance from Mecca, at some distance from Mecca. Uthman bin Affan was sent forth to assess the situation in Mecca. Now he didn't come back. The Muslims were perturbed. At that point, the Prophet took a pledge from the 1,400 people that were with him. They all pledged that if Osman has been killed, they will all give their lives because one of their own has been killed. Now they didn't have any weapons save for knives to cut the sacrificial animals. Now I'm just saying, this is now the Quran. At a later date, the Quran speaks. Now these were the beautiful decisions that the Prophet took. The Quran did not support him at that point, but he was seeing dreams. As I said, he had become more and more confident. He could take decisions now. He was having premonitions, dreams, communications, inspirations that are not strictly Quran. The Quran later on narrates this incident. لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ يُبَايَعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرِ. Indeed, Allah became pleased with the faithful when they pledged allegiance under the tree. فَعَلِمَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. And God understood what is in their hearts. فَأَنزَلَ السَّكِينَ عَلَيْهِمْ. And He brought peace to their heart, tranquility. وَأَثَابَهُمْ فَتْحًا قَرِيبًا. And He gave them a victory that was to come very soon. Now I'm just saying, if the Quran speaks favorably of the Sahaba, now think about it, and the Quran speaks favorably of the Sahaba on many, many instances. How can we say all the Sahaba were bad? It's something that we need to understand. You see, we people receive things from the pulpit. The pulpit gives us everything we know. The pulpit is not being very true. It's not being very true. The pulpit brings out a hadith. The Prophet has said, when my hadith conflicts with the Quran, throw it away. So we know the Sahaba were not angels. We know they committed crimes. Their hands were chopped. They were whipped in public for the acts that they committed. They annoyed the Prophet, as you will see now. But by and large, it's a human community. You get people who do this and do wrong things here and there. But by and large, they are good people. The Sahaba, if you look at the Quran, by and large, you will say, no, overall they were good people. But I'm just saying, look at where the community has been brought to. And on that note, isn't it a travesty that Muhammad Rasulullah is the Uswa al-Hasana? The Quran is the communication of God. But our pulpits are devoid of Quran. They are devoid of the example of Muhammad Rasulullah. Leave aside the history of the Prophet. We don't even know the conduct of the Prophet or the ethics of the Prophet. That the Prophet used to behave in this way. Although statements of the Prophet. Great injustice has been done to this community. They have been deprived of Quran and the Prophet. The Quran only ordains itself and the Prophet. It does not ordain any Imams. Of course, Imams are a part of the prophetic mission, but the Quran ordains the Prophet and the Prophet and the Quran. Both of these things are missing. Had we been reading Quran accurately, we would have not fallen prey to what the pulpits are preaching today. In any case, the Meccans came to the Prophet. Now, this is the genius of the Prophet. They said, we can't allow you inside Mecca. This is Uthman bin Affan. He is alive. We allowed him to perform his pilgrimage. Instead, let us sign a pact. And there are 4 clauses. It's a very simple treatise. There are 4 clauses to this treaty. Now, look at this. This is the genius of the Prophet. The first one is that Muhammad will go back with his man and come back the following year without any weapons apart from knives that are used to cut the animals. There will be a 10-year truce and peace between the Muslims and the Quraysh. You can't ask for more than that. Imagine, 10-year peace between the Muslims and the Quraysh. The third clause is that whoever wants to join with Muhammad can do so and is free to do so. Whoever wants to join with Quraysh may do so and can do so. So the coercion and the threat is being removed. The fourth is that whoever flees from Medina, from Mecca and goes to Medina without the consent of the guardian, Muhammad will send them back. But whoever from Medina goes to Mecca, the Meccans will keep. The Prophet signed it. Obviously, you know what I mean by signing. He put his stamp on it. Now on that note, obviously, Mawla Ali wrote the treatise. The Meccans said, well, we don't believe in Allah, so cancel the name Allah. So they, instead of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, they put Bismi Allahumma. And then at the end it said Muhammad Rasulullah, and the Quraysh, they said, well, we don't believe you in Rasulullah. So the Prophet said, Ali, take off Rasulullah. Ali said, well, I can't do it. So the Prophet said, show me where it is, and he cancelled it off. This is Muhammad. That's Ali. Just imagine. In any case, the Sahaba started to doubt the Prophet. Khalifa Omar began to doubt him, that you conceded so much in this treaty. You have conceded so much in this treaty. There is nothing left for us. The Prophet said at one instance, Umar, I am indeed the messenger of God. I know what I'm doing. So this is the situation there at hand. This is the physical situation. You're a strategist. You're a moral person. You're a divine guide. You have human beings who are thinking in worldly sense, who can't see that far, who are angry people. How dare they not allow us to go inside Mecca? This is what happens, right? The mu'mineen gets very, very aroused. Remember, we were in Hyde Park and walking around the streets of London doing Ya Hussein and Arba'in, right? I love all of that. And so there were these women and they were getting horrified, saying, oh my God, what is this? And the more they were getting horrified, the more we were beating ourselves, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. The way mu'mineen are, right? And the police said, we don't need to beat them up, they're beating themselves up. Honestly, this is exactly what happened, right? In my younger days. The mu'mineen were aroused. They were saying, how dare they do this? Now, the Surah Fath was revealed. Some of it was revealed at that point, some of it was revealed at Hudaybiyyah, at the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah, and some of it was revealed in the following, second year after this, at the Conquest of Mecca. The verses were revealed, Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. We have given you a manifest victory. Now the Sahaba couldn't understand what is the manifest victory here. Do you know what happened? In that respite, there were many, many things that were happening. First and foremost, the Prophet was able to freely preach to the tribes in that area. Those tribes now know that there is a peace treaty, so Islam has been recognized now. It was a recognition of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad. He is being recognized, we can go to him, we have full amnesty, and the Quraysh will not attack us. So many of the tribes now are joining the Prophet Muhammad. Many are joining the Quraysh, or some are joining the Quraysh. The Prophet Muhammad now is free to send letters and delegations and his emissaries to distant lands to invite them to Islam. The Ethiopians converted to Islam. The king of Yemen also converted to Islam because the Prophet prophesied. The king of Yemen, I think Damdam, he was a nephew of the emperor of Persia. The Prophet said, do not fear, in his letter, your uncle, for he has died 3 months ago. And he was shocked. He said, well, it takes, no, he has died, sorry. The Prophet said he has died. And he was shocked. He said, it takes 3 months to take news of somebody's death from Persia to Yemen. So in order to verify, he sent somebody. That person came back within a month and he said, yes, your uncle has indeed died a day before you received a letter from the Prophet Muhammad. So he converts. Now these are the prophecies of the Blessed Prophet. The king of Egypt, a Christian again, he is very sympathetic to the Prophet, but a Christian, so he doesn't want to convert. So, but due to the fact that he is seen a lot from the Muslims and seeing that they are on the righteous, he sends gifts to the Blessed Prophet, and he sent Maria to the Blessed Prophet as a gift with her sister Shireen. So they were sent to the Prophet. So in the midst of all of these things, the Prophet is gaining more and more support and more followers. Now, there are very important things that happen after this. Now, I can't mention all of them, so I'll just mention one. The Jews that had left earlier on, the Bani Nadir or Nudair, they had gone and settled with the people of Khaybar. These were 8 fortresses. Now, these Jews were very powerful, known for making their weapons and for their produce. So economically, they were very rich. Now, they were a constant source of menace to the Prophet and a constant source of threat. So if we analyze the prophetic actions, we will say, well, yes, truly some of the battles were defensive. But some of the battles were preemptive and defensive. And you do not find a strictly offensive battle from the Prophet. So we don't find a strictly offensive battle from the Prophet for the sake of converting anybody. They are either purely defensive, but don't be naive, they're not only purely defensive. A lot of them are preemptive battles, and quite a few of them are preemptive, but they're justified that there was a real existential threat and those people had done things. So the Prophet in the 7th Hijrah marches into Khaybar. He conquers each and every one of their fortresses, and of course the last one and the biggest one of them was the most difficult one, and Imam Ali killed Marhab, and he played the most outstanding role. Then you know that in Badr, in Uhud, the historians say everybody fled. There were 2 people who were next to the Prophet, Imam Ali for sure, and maybe Talha. They stayed next to the Prophet till the end. And then of course at the trench killed Amr ibn Abdul Wud and at Khaybar, and that is one of the reasons why Imam Ali was an outstanding person and of prestige and recognition. In any case, when Khaybar collapsed, the Muslims made a treaty with Khaybar that they would give 50% of their produce to the Prophet. Now suddenly Medina became very prosperous and extremely rich. Now let's look at the impact of all of this on the tribes that are around the Prophet. At this point in time, the Romans and the Persians are not concerned about the Prophet because they're saying, you know what, is a little Bedouin tribe and doing whatever he's doing, we are not concerned. But now they are becoming an existential threat, not only to the Quraysh, but everybody around and the big empires, and we want to take it up from there tomorrow. Now their prosperity, their strength, the numbers that are increasing, as you will see tomorrow, how many numbers multiplied, gives an added incentive to those around him to join with him. I need to finish on this note, that in this context, when so many people are joining with the Prophet, and you know for a fact that these are tribes, they are not accustomed to the message of the Prophet. The Prophet doesn't have time to preach to each and every one of them. He doesn't. He doesn't have time to show them his physical conduct, that he is getting slapped, he's getting beaten, he turns the other cheek, he forgives them. He doesn't have the time to show them that these guys prevented me, I am giving back to them. These guys chastised me, I am forgiving them. These guys chased me out, I am inviting them back in. He doesn't have the time to show them anything. So only the major tenets of Islam are given to them. They are not cultured in Islam. And that was enough for them to set them off on the right path, because he couldn't do anything else. And majority of these people were coming to Islam unopposed, without any warfare and without any fight. A point that I forgot here that I need to just finish off is that the part of this treaty was that whoever from the Meccans comes to Medina, the Medinians will send him back, and whoever from the Medina goes to Mecca, the Meccans will keep them. As a result, what happened was that the people from Medina were going to Mecca, they were impressing the people of Mecca, the people of Mecca were converting. And now without any persecution, they were praying and they were following Islam. And that was then spreading Islam within Mecca. Look at the brilliance of the Prophet. The brilliance of the Prophet. Now what happened was that it became unbearable for the Meccans to host these people, so they chased them away. Or they made it difficult for them. So these people ran away. Now they can't go back to Medina. So they have to go to some other place, right? And their properties were confiscated because the Meccans, obviously, Abu Sufyan and the people that were there were very unforgiving and very intolerant people. Now the Meccans who had settled outside Mecca and not gone to Medina had no provisions. So what were they going to resort to? The tribal customs of raiding Meccan caravans. So they began to raid Meccan caravans. The Meccan trade routes were being suffocated. It was a trade center and all the Meccans were suffering. So they went to the Prophet and they said, we need to repeal the fourth clause that you can't give refuge to anybody who comes from Mecca. So all these Meccan converts were invited into Medina and the strength of the Muslim community started growing even more. I'm just saying that when you look at it properly, you can just see the workings of a most brilliant mind without the aid of revelation at this point or direct intervention of that sort. We come to the mention of Hazrat al-Akbar. Somebody in a poetic fashion narrates the sentiment of Imam Hussein. At the death of al-Akbar, al-Hussein says, "O star, how short-lived was your life. Such is the fate of stars that take birth at dawn. O moon, how quickly you were seized by the eclipse. You were prevented from becoming a full moon. When I speak, O child, your name appears upon my tongue. And when I remain silent, my heart is always involved with you." The Ansar had given their lives. And it was agreed with the army of Yazid that now, since the numbers have dwindled so greatly, that Hussein's forces would engage in single combat. The blessed Imam turns to his son and he says, "O child, I wish for you to take the sword and to fight the battle on behalf of your old father. But first go and bid farewell to your aunt, your sisters, and your mothers." We hear from the Dhakirin that the women surround Akbar and they begin to weep. Several times the cloth of the tent lifted and then it dropped. Every time Akbar would want to emerge, someone would surround him. Finally, Akbar emerges from the tent. Hussein looks at him and then points his two fingers towards the sky. "O Allah, you be a witness. Now I send to them that child of mine that most resembles your messenger in his speech, in his features, in his conduct. Whenever we wish to behold your messenger, we would look at him, O God." Then he cried out aloud. Hamid ibn Muslim says, "I heard his cries. It was as if a mother was crying upon the body of her youthful child." Akbar ascends his steed. He says, "O child, move slowly into the battlefield." Akbar leaves Hussein going ahead slowly. He hears something behind him. He turns and he sees Hussein walking behind him. putting his hands upon his chest. He says, "O father, have you not bid me farewell?" "Indeed I have, O child." He said, "O father, then what is this that I see you in?" He said, "O child, had you a son like Akbar, you would not have asked me this question." Akbar enters into the battlefield. He cries out, "I am Ali, the son of Hussein ibn Ali. By God, the fornicator's child shall not rule upon us. I will unleash upon you the blows of al-Hashimi in protecting my father." We hear from the Zakirin, Hussein cannot bear and withstand Akbar's separation. He brings the mother of Akbar and says, "I shall pray. You say Ameen. O Lord, the one who returned Yusuf to Yaqub, bring back my Akbar to me." She says Ameen, and Akbar returns. He says, "O father, the weight of the coat of mail has exhausted me, and the thirst has killed me. Is there a drop of water?" Hussein cries and says, "O child, take off the coat of mail. Soon your grandfather will quench you with the goblets of Kawthar. Place this ring into your mouth and go, O child." Akbar re-enters into the battlefield. Munqadh bin Murrah says to his companion, "By God, I will inflict such a wound upon this youth that will cause his father's heart to bleed." Akbar is fighting. He is surrounded. He is struck upon the back of his head. He places his head upon the mane of the horse and his arms around the neck of the horse, preventing him from falling. He is surrounded by the enemies and he is being struck. As he is descending, a spear is embedded upon his blessed chest. He falls to the ground and says, "O father, take the final farewell of your child." Hussein comes running to the body of Akbar. He sees Akbar breathing his last. He said, "How insolent these people are, O child, for having violated the sanctity of the Messenger of God by killing you. O child, this world has become a darkened place after you." Akbar breaks into a smile. He says, "O father, here is my grandfather quenching my thirst and saying, 'O Hussein, hasten to me.'" Akbar breathes his last. Hussein says, "O child, God has relieved you of the sufferings of this world." Hussein calls on to the youths of Hashim and he says, "O children, O my sons, come and take your brother away." As Hussein walks with the body, Sakina comes to Hussein and she says, "O father, do you have any news of my brother Akbar?" He says, "O child, your brother has been killed." She cries out, "Wa aliya wa ghurbata." Imam Hussein says, "Bear it with patience, O child. How may I bear when my brother has been killed and my father has been deprived of his son?" وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا وَأَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ مَاتَ مِنْ حُسَيْنٍ